Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hard Hats and Hard Roads. We have a very powerful episode for you today, and it's very near and dear to me, and I feel very lucky to be able to have this powerful guest on my show. First off, I want to introduce my amazing co host here, Amanda Unsworth. She's our local psychologist. Many of you may know my special guest, but for those that don't, please welcome Phil Fontaine. He's a visionary leader, a trailblazer, and one of Canada's most influential Indigenous advocates. As the former national chief of the Assembly of First Nations, you, Phil, courageously brought the painful legacy of residential schools to national spotlight, forever changing the conversation around reconciliation and justice for Indigenous peoples. With unwavering resilience and a powerful voice, you have been at the forefront of the fight for Indigenous rights, guiding Canada toward a future rooted in truth, respect, and healing. Your legacy as a leader and activist continues to inspire generations and remains a cornerstone of Canada's journey toward a meaningful resolution. So I want to formally welcome you, Phil, and we just want to say how much we honor and respect you. Your unique perspectives and your willingness to educate, talk about, and share your story today is very much appreciated. And the focus on today's episode will specifically be about healing, because to heal, we need to communicate with each other. So that's what we're going to do today, if that's all right with you, obviously.
Sounds like the thing to do.
It definitely is starting to be the norm now, is everyone's starting to communicate and talk and hear each other's
Well,
stories to heal. Hey,
that's right. And one of the uh, pieces in language that's become kind of the word to use is reconciliation. Right? Everybody talks about reconciliation, whether we're talking about school kids or corporate leaders.
That's right.
Reconciliation is something that's been embraced by pretty much the entire country.
Yeah,
And it has its beginning in the residential school experience
it's a beginning.
that became a public story. And so now it's part of our narrative together, Canadians and First Nations.
And so how did reconciliation come to be? Like what was its origin?
When we first started talking about the residential school experience, abuse in residential schools, the stripping away of our cultural integrity, the attempt to eradicate our languages, and ultimately acceptance by the people that committed these awful injuries to our psyche, our persona, our bodies, our mind, and they finally came to admit that they were responsible and they were wrong in what took place in these residential schools. And they were they were situated from one end of the country to the other, with the largest number being in Western Canada.
Yeah. That's
So that's how it came, how it came to be part of our language,
mm-hmm.
part of our story, or stories, and our challenge, each of us, right?
Yeah.
But it's really where I'm talking about the challenges before the entire country to bring about true reconciliation and healing to our communities
Mm-hmm.
and to the country itself. We all need to heal, and it's not easy. It's a major challenge,
Oh,
but it
100%.
seems that many people are willing to take on this challenge because they realize that healing and reconciliation will empower so many people that have been disempowered and abused from their center. Each of us has a center,
Mm-hmm.
and that center was taken away from our people and our communities, and we've uh, we've moved back to that center of our universe, and it's I believe a powerful moment for so many of our people.
I agree. If we coming together and healing, it can empower not just our own culture, but cultures around us as well to learn more about our people and what we can do to heal as a collection, in my opinion. But
Enriches everyone.
enriches everyone. But
Yeah.
specifically, it's everyone has their own individual story, and each of those stories matter. And it it's just very nice to be able to have you on to tell us yours. Um, if you want, we'll ask you your first question here. Um, to start off, is it okay if we talk a little bit about your childhood, Phil?
It's your show,
Yeah.
Gabe. So I will make an effort to do right by your show. And
Oh,
sure, let's talk about my childhood.
so I hear you're one of 12 children in your family. But from the beginning, do you mind telling us a little bit about your parents?
Uh, you're right about one thing. There were 12 of us, 10 boys, 2 girls, and our father and mother were Ojibwe people from Saguin.
Mm-hmm.
They both attended the same residential school I attended, and my father's mother, my grandmother on on that side of the family, went to an industrial school in St. Boniface, Manitoba, and so there's a long history of residential school experiences in our family, and I have a picture of my father when he was 14
Mm-hmm.
at, uh, at the Fort Alexander Indian Residential School. And there's a picture of me in 1951 at 7 when I made my first communion. And well, actually, this would have been June 52
Oh, wow.
when we had our first communion. And our father had already passed on in February of my first year of residential school.
Oh,
And our mother, I have pictures of my mom in residential school, and she learned how to cook at the residential school, and she was taught by a nun by the name of Sister Bonaventure. My mom called her Sister Bun, and she was actually uh, an indigenous person from around Saint Laurent, and
hmm.
and she spoke the language Ojibwe really well.
Really?
In addition to French, obviously, and English. And my mom and I used to go visit her at the mother house in St. Boniface. And she was well into her 90s, close to 100.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I took pictures of my mom with Sister Bun. And it was really a special moment to do, to do that. And we went to see the old principal. I say old principal because he was old then when we went to see him, but he had been principal at the school before I started, and he wasn't the principal when my mom was at residential school. But this priest, his name was Father Brashe. He spoke Ojibwe fluently, and he used to preach, always preach in Ojibwe, and he was French, very French. He loved to eat frog legs, I'm told. And this was a well-known story in the family and in the community. And he'd send out the boys to go get the big frogs, and so that he could eat some frog legs,
Delicious.
keeping with his culture,
Yeah.
as opposed to moments like that, eating moose meat or
Yeah.
bannock or yeah.
You got to get the big frogs, though.
Well, he knew where to send the boys for the big frogs.
Yeah. Eh?
And we have pictures of him. He'd have a sleigh full of girls, and he'd be taking them for a ride somewhere on the reserve or into town. And he always wore black gloves, right? Black gloves. And my late brother would say he'd scratch himself on the head like this with his black glove, and then he'd carry on. Yeah, that would have been nice. I never had that experience with at the school. That was already the school and its culture and its ways had already changed, because by the time I got to the rest school in 51 September, we had cars. We had cars on the reserve, and the first cars were those owned by the church.
Yeah.
And so that's how we traveled, and we had a car. We always had a car at home, but we also had horses, a team of horses and sleigh. We had cattle. We had, we had a small farm. We call it a hobby farm, I guess, today, but that was part of that's part of how my father made sure we always had enough to eat, well fed and well dressed, and
Bet
he
you had a
was
lot
a
of chores, hey?
Yeah, he worked in the pulp mill.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he worked in the pulp mill, and he made sure that the older boys also were gainfully employed. And one of the first jobs I remember that Jim and Walter having was the construction of the last dam on the Winnipeg River.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
really...
it was, I have such fond memories of my childhood. I tell you, maybe it's just nostalgia. Maybe it was tougher than I think it was. I mean, there were two boys that died, so there were 10 of us, boys and girls, my mom and dad, and we always had relatives at the house staying with us, because we had a pretty fair-sized house, and we could accommodate a fair number of people. And
it was a very busy house, hey?
Oh man, my mom was always cooking.
Oh.
And because we had a large family, a lot of young ones, she had a woman helper. I mean, you call them a nanny, right? And I told this to a professor from the University of Manitoba. He said, "Your mom had a nanny?" I said, "Well, no, it was a woman that came to stay with us and help my mom with the household." and he thought that was quite unusual. Uh, an unusual arrangement on a reserve.
To have a nanny, yeah.
Yeah.
A helper. That's amazing. Well, it sounds like so. I actually did prepare this question, but I'm actually genuinely curious. What was your favorite meal that your mom made you?
My favorite meal would have been porridge.
Porridge.
We always had porridge, yeah.
It was homemade, I bet you. Hey.
Oh, yeah. And from time to time, my mom would make pancakes, beautiful pancakes. We always had bannock. We very seldom had loaf bread. My mom
Oh,
would make bannock, and a large number of bannock. You know, they're round. She'd make 6, 7 of those,
wow.
and they would go pretty quick. And we had we we usually used lard, the bannock, right?
Yeah, that's what I was told. That's what Grandma told me. She's like, use lard. It like adds so much flavor.
Yeah. And so when we had pancakes, you had the syrup.
Yeah.
We'd mix the lard with the pancakes. I'd with the syrup, and we'd make caramel, kind of.
Oh,
Yeah,
Ooh,
yeah.
yum.
you're teaching me all types of stuff. I'm gonna go home and try and make this.
And our mom was just a wonderful cook.
How did you first hear about the residential schools, and how was your family introduced to them? Like, I was wondering if did anyone come to your door, or do you mind telling us a little bit about that day?
Uh, as I said, I don't recall anyone being forced to go to the residential school. It was always by persuasion. And our mom and dad had been to the res school. All my older siblings had been to the res school, and we had relatives that had been to the residential school, and so many people that were associated with our family had been to the residential school. So it was taken for granted that that's where you went for your education. And when you were there, you stayed there. You didn't come home. And that was the most difficult part of the residential school experience for me, was being separated from my family, being away from home.
Well,
And being away from home,
yeah.
I'm not talking about like a great distance separating our home from the school.
Yeah.
We were quite close to the residential school in terms of
Distance.
distance, but it was like a million miles away because we weren't
Couldn't see
allowed to
'em.
go home. We had to stay in the school,
That's sad.
and I attended 2 residential schools in my time, 7 on the reserve and 3 in Winnipeg.
Oh wow. Like right in the city?
Winnipeg, one of the fanciest places in the city.
Oh.
They established an oblate run residential school for First Nations high school students from all over the province,
Wow.
boys and girls. And it used to be the old Deer Lodge Hospital for veterans, and there was a new Deer Lodge built on Portage Avenue. So this building became available, and and the church still very strongly believed that residential schools was the best way to educate our people.
Yeah. Well, little did they know.
Well, they knew that that they weren't producing the kinds of numbers in terms of graduates as they had hoped for. And so they celebrated the occasion when they'd have graduates. And, it was absolutely worth celebrating. But in our school on the reserve, we didn't have anyone graduate from high school. They went out to either St. Mary's in Kenora or LeBret, Saskatchewan.
Oh wow. That's a distance. That's a
Well,
distance.
it's far.
Yeah. But like,
Probably
yeah,
14.
yeah. If I was gonna ask you, Phil, how are you when you were away and you weren't able to come back home, how were you able to keep the foundation of family so well?
Siblings in school with me, cousins, and then we'd have a weekly visit from our mother on Sundays. So that was a big day for us
Something to look
because
forward to. It
we
was a
get to
goal.
visit with our mother for at least a couple of hours each Sunday.
Aw. And do you mind me asking how many years did this happen for?
Say that again?
How many years did you have to see your mom every Sunday? Or how long, sorry?
7 years. And then when I went to Winnipeg,
Yeah,
uh, the visits were more infrequent.
that's right.
So I very seldom saw our mother when I was going to school in Winnipeg.
Yeah. That would have been really tough, hey? For all you guys.
Yeah,
But
because
you had each other even in Winnipeg?
just one brother, but he left after the first year.
Oh man.
So I went on for a couple more years at that school.
Yeah. Oh. So how were you able to preserve your language like through the school? Like was the goal to annihilate our language and culture, as I understand so many people lost that part of their lives?
Well, I mean, it was very difficult for the authorities to actually eradicate our languages because there are a whole number of, say, boys, residential school students that that spoke the language, and so there is a fair bit of Ojibwe spoken
Mm.
in the school that I attended on the reserve. And then when we visited with our parents, or in our case, our mom, we spoke in Ojibwe.
You were allowed? It was okay?
Well, we did. And then when we went home for Christmas or Easter and the summer holidays,
Yeah.
that's what we spoke, was Ojibwe. In Winnipeg, there is a misguided attempt on the part of the authorities there to convince us that English would be a better way of communicating in the school because there were so many kids from different communities that didn't speak necessarily Ojibwe or Cree or Dakota,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so they gently insisted that we speak English, and so in fact, much of the not discourse, but much of the conversations, most of the conversations, I should say, were in English. You know, my friends from Fort Frances and Kenora, they spoke uh, Ojibwe as well, but we conversed in English.
Mm-hmm.
And my friends from up north that were Cree, or as they say, Uji Cree, we spoke in English to each other because neither of us knew or spoke the other's language, right?
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, that makes me happy that you guys stuck to your language and culture within the family. Like I'm proud
Yeah,
that it's within the family.
but I would make the point that there's still some loss of the language, right? our age group
Hmm.
wasn't as fluent in the language as the older siblings were,
Mm.
and that is obviously an outcome of the approach being taken by the authorities of the school.
So, how do you
And,
think it is today with the preserving our language?
well, I didn't do a very good job of preserving my language with my family, my kids, my grandchildren. I regret that, but that's on me. I don't blame anyone else for that. So now my granddaughter Phoebe is in the immersion school in Winnipeg. So she's learning the language.
Oh, that's so happy to hear. Good for Phoebe.
Yeah. She's quite an artistic young girl. Very, very artistic.
I bet you're really
So for
proud.
Christmas, oh boy. So for Christmas, we bought her a sketchbook, a carrying case, and so much related to her love of art.
Oh,
And,
that's wonderful that you support her artistic way
yeah,
about
she's quite
herself.
prolific in that regard.
Pardon me, sorry?
I think she's prolific in terms of her art. Yeah, and she's
Oh,
taking guitar lessons
wow.
and singing lessons. So
So she's in
she's
all
going to be
types of art.
oh yeah.
Wow.
Phoebe is yeah.
How old is she?
10.
10.
Wow. Good for her.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So this is a weird question, and we don't have to air it if you don't want to. This one was mostly something that I came up with because I've had weird interactions with people, not just in my community, but even in the social media world, where people genuinely believe that the majority of Indigenous people in Canada had a good time in residential schools and that they wanted to be there. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, we made our own good time, right? we did as best we could to create a good atmosphere for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But there was always this longing for your family, your home, and I certainly felt that for the 10 years I've spent in 2 residential schools. Terrible longing for the family, the home, mother, and in terms of wanting to be there, that was never my desire.
Mm-hmm.
And none of my siblings ever wanted to be there either. And in fact, one year, I wasn't yet in residential school. My parents took my older siblings out of residential school and put them uh, put them to day school.
Mm-hmm.
There was a day school not too far from where we lived. And so for 1 year, my older siblings attended day school. In some kind of protest, I've never been able to figure out what the story was behind this decision by my mother and father, our cousins, who also did the same as our parents, because they all lived close to the Anglican day school. And it was in protest over some ill-conceived decision by the school in terms of how they looked after the kids. And so during the course of that year, when they were absent from the residential school, the the principal was quite often uh, making overtures to the mom and dad to get the kids back to the rest school.
Yeah. So they're kind of,
The pressure.
yeah. What was the
Well,
word that you used earlier? It'll come to me.
Persuasion.
Persuasion. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was the word. Yeah. It sounds pretty traumatic on your mother's part.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to hear that. That makes it really difficult, but I am thankful that she was able to see you at some point, at least once a week for a little while there. Like I didn't know that information actually.
Yeah, once a week. And then when my brothers, older brothers, 3 of them, went to school in Kenora,
hmm
our mother would also go visit them on Sundays, on the weekend, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Sunday and so. And so we would miss her visit when she was in Kenora visiting our brothers.
Oh, you'd
So it
share.
depended. Yeah, you had
Pardon?
to share each other.
Yeah, that and there were other families that had that same arrangement, so
Yeah.
it was tough for them too.
Your family was all spread out, hey.
Oh yeah, I remember my mom telling me when they went to visit the boys in Kenora, and our cousin next door uh, had one boy there, and the mothers were crying on their back in the car, the back seat, leaving Kenora to come back to the res because it was so far, and Kenora was only 130 miles from our reserve, St. Mary's Indian Residential School.
Hmm.
But in those days, gosh, that was like
Right.
going from here to the moon.
Well, yeah, the vehicles aren't the same now, are they?
Or roads.
No,
Or roads, or maybe
yeah.
we had the same kind of horses, but
Yeah, well, we couldn't use horses to go that far,
no, eh?
but they would use horses to go from our reserve to the mine in Bissett to go work there. That's where Gabe worked,
Oh,
Cool.
DeLeo, yeah, with his younger brother, JB, my dad.
did he work? Did they work at the mill together, the pulp mill?
No, my dad did, but Pileo was into mining. So the first job for my dad was at the mine,
Right.
and then Pileo, after his wife died, he left for northern Saskatchewan, and our father went to work at the pulp mill.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting. Yeah, pulp mills. I have quite a few years experience working at mills. It's hard work.
Yeah, what kind of mill?
Yeah.
Pulp?
No, it was in BC. I did a finger joint mill. It's a very unique process. And then
Mhm.
here I worked at the OSB mill.
Mm.
Yeah. It was yeah, I was trying to get in on pulp, but they're full up at the time. So for me, I'm curious, and so is Amanda. As a survivor of the school system and being so open about your experiences, what really motivates you about being open and honest about your experience and your story?
The most significant challenge about that is knowing that you're not alone.
Mhm.
That the experience that I have, for example, is not unique to me. That there are many, many other people that suffered from the same experiences I had in my life, and so that made it easier for me to talk about the residential school experience. Not that it's ever easy to talk about abuse.
No.
Mhm.
I mean, you have to be you have to be pretty well, I'm not going to say I was courageous, but you have to be on your on 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 point about what it is that you want to talk about and why,
Mm-hmm.
and is it going to make a difference? And I actually believed very sincerely that speaking about this issue was going to make a difference to a lot of people,
And
and I think I was right to a very large extent. Because as you noted in your introduction, Gabe, our collective understanding of the residential school experience and why we need to focus on healing and reconciliation, because that'll that'll make our communities healthier places, and many are not at this point, and it's understandable why they're not.
yeah,
So it's best to put it out in the open.
try and spread the word of healing and
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
at least give people the invitation that someone's going to listen.
yeah, yeah. And
And
people did listen, but not at first.
no,
They
hey,
didn't want to believe, and so they didn't want to believe because for many it was a shameful part of their lives, and and so eventually it became much easier because so many more people were engaged in the conversation about residential schools.
yeah, it's I really appreciate all the extravagant work you've done over the years to try and not try, you did. You to get the
Mm-hmm.
word out on what has happened and like you've done. I'm really proud that you're my family, so I really appreciate that that I could say that.
Well, you're being extremely generous, Gabe, but I want to make this point that, of course, I wasn't alone. I'm not alone in this
Mhm.
story. It's a it's a very uh, tragic chapter in Canadian history,
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
and it was largely unknown for such a long time. And now this tragic chapter that was missing in the Canadian story is being written by our people,
Yeah.
and it's making a real difference to the lives of all of us, and I include Canadians in that. It's like the story about the 215 unmarked graves in Kamloops. People were shocked. All of a sudden, Canada was the focus of international attention,
Mhm.
and people from various parts of the world were asking, "How could this happen in Canada, this wonderful country?" And and it shamed so many Canadians. Canadians are embarrassed, uh, and that propelled many of us to push this further. And I think we did the right thing. Because in 2008, June 11, 2008, the Prime Minister apologized to our people in the House of Commons. And then we went to Rome to meet with Benedict XVI. Uh, and while we didn't get a full apology from Benedict, that, in our view, it opened the door for further discussions. And so what we had recently was our visit to the Vatican once again
Mhm.
to meet with, this time, Pope Francis, who made a commitment to us that he would come to visit us in our homeland and to express sorrow, but beyond that, to apologize for the residential school experience. And this was a personal pilgrimage for Pope Francis. Started in Musqueam in Alberta, went to Quebec City, and then to Iqaluit, and then back to Rome. And on the flight back to Rome, we talked about the experience being a genocide, which is quite a powerful expression, because up until that time, no one had ever said genocide, but said cultural genocide, which is less than, the full expression of genocide. It was a step-by-step journey, a worthwhile journey, and we're better off for all of how this whole thing transpired.
I think it's pretty.
Apologies. Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, the largest human rights settlement agreement anywhere in the world at that time.
Yes, that's very important.
We're still experiencing the dividends of that settlement and the apology, because you have day schools, day scholars, you have the 60s school.
Yeah.
So there's so much of our community now that's been drawn into working together as a collective to make things better.
And we got the Highway of Tears going on. Like, it's never ending. For Canadians, what do you think they can do to address the harm caused by the schools? What can they do to acknowledge the harm? Right.
The most significant effort on their part would be to focus on education, to teach in all of our schools the story of the residential school experience, so that our people, all peoples, become educated and informed about their story as well. It's a Canadian story. It isn't just a story about residential school students.
That's right.
And the youth experience by them. It's a Canadian story.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's all of our story, and if we all collectively learn about it, we can all, like I said earlier, let's all heal together. That's honestly what this podcast is about. I when we talked on the phone, I had mentioned that the goal on this podcast is to talk about stories and people's experiences in different industries and topics, and mostly mental health. And if one person can relate to a story on this podcast and either get help or it saves their lives, in my opinion, it's mission accomplished. I'm not worried about social media or anything like that. I just want to help people. So that's the goal here. So your words are very important, and to hear that there's many other people that have gone through the same thing you've gone through, and it's more people are opening up, and I'm glad that you're one of our biggest role models. It's you are, and it's very much appreciated of all the work you've done. So I was wondering, the term reconciliation, what do you think about that term? Or do you think that there's a better, more proper term we could use for that? Or is that a proper word?
No, it's an inclusive
Yes,
term.
that's right.
It's not, it doesn't belong to one person or one group or one community. Reconciliation is about the country. And we will never achieve true reconciliation without knowing the truth of our experiences. And so we have to combine both knowing the truth about the residential school experience and then committing ourselves to healing and reconciliation. And this has to be a collective effort.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. That's a really good point. In 2008, the government formally apologized for their past actions and policies related to the schools. Being so historic, can you take us back to that specific moment and how did you feel about that?
It was for the ages. It was a moment in time, and it's for all time. It was for the ages, and the words expressed by the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, are recorded for all time. You will have people that say, and I've said, oh, he wasn't sincere. I looked in his eyes and he wasn't sincere. Okay, fine. Except those words that he spoke are recorded.
Mhm.
And so people can go back to his speech and say, oh, yeah, that's what he said. He meant, oh, wow, right? Significant.
Very significant.
I think it was a very powerful statement, and we helped craft a statement. So that's the important thing to note.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was affected by it too. I watched him while he was speaking because I was on the floor of the House of Commons.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, well, sure.
Wow.
And that's where the decision to establish the residential schools was taken, was on the floor of the House of Commons. It was in the House of Commons,
Wow.
right? So there we were
Yeah.
receiving words of apology from the Canadian government, and we were listening and speaking in our own right to the apology.
So powerful.
That is so powerful. I couldn't even imagine what the feeling would be to be in that room while that's happening.
Well, gosh, everyone was on their feet, all parliamentarians, all people in the gallery, the drum, you could hear the drum, people cheering, applauding. They just wouldn't stop cheering and applauding.
Wow.
It is electric. And outside on the front lawn, there are thousands of our people there
Oh,
watching on big screens the apology.
that's amazing. Oh, wow. I wish I could say I could be there, but I think I was in high school in northern Alberta.
I watched it on TV.
Oh,
I wasn't in high school.
that's really impressive, Phil. I can't believe that you were there for that. Um, I feel like apologizing is a wonderful first step. It's acknowledgement, and it's a way of healing. But do you feel like more can be done, or do you think this is where? Yeah.
Well, it would be wrong for us to think that that's the end of the story.
Right.
In fact, it's the beginning
Hmm.
of a large part of our story. And much is being done every day to make sure that people know about the residential school experience, and are aware of the apology, are committed to reconciliation, and committed to making our communities stronger and healthier places.
Well, Amanda, I think you were telling me about your children and their education on the subject.
Yeah, I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, also an artist, a little girl. But yeah, their education on the subject doesn't, oh my goodness, is so much more than I ever received, for sure. I think it was like a couple paragraphs in my social studies textbook. And my kiddos come home and not only do they know the stories, they know the facts. They really like feel the stories. Like my son in particular was very much like, Mom, I can't imagine not being able to see you, or being, having to visit you, or like I can't imagine what that would feel like. And that's the connecting piece. That to me is the true kind of reconciliation that this new generation is going to get, where they get understanding, not just apology, like true empathy. And that's going to be really powerful to see these little ones grow up and how they're going to manage.
What advice would you give young Indigenous leaders looking to advocate for their communities?
I'm not old enough to give that kind of advice to young leaders, actually. But the best approach our leaders can take is to listen very carefully to what their people are saying.
Mm-hmm.
And our people have much to say about their lives and their communities. And if we don't listen to our people, it's a wasted opportunity to make a difference. And so the only advice I would give young leaders today is to be very careful, well, not careful, but to be vigilant about listening. Listening really carefully and closely. And trying to understand the message that is being conveyed to you by your people.
That's right. Yeah, gotta sit down and listen to all the stories and ingest them.
Like we're doing today.
Like we're doing today.
This is not easy stuff.
No, it's not. And
Thank you so much for spending time with us this afternoon.
yeah,
I enjoyed my time with you, my friends, and you, my relative, Gabe.
Thank you. I really appreciate you being here. Like I've said probably 5 times now, but like it's an honor. You're taking time out of your day to be here, and I know it's not easy, and you have a lot going on right now, and I appreciate you.
Well, but what's important is that we are able to have a conversation.
That's right.
And that's where a lot of change takes place.
Yeah.
Is in conversations.
It's in conversation.
And to begin these in many cases, very difficult conversations.
Mm-hmm. But very important.
Yeah. Thank you very much for listening.
Oh, 100%. Mental health is the connection to others, and unfortunately, the schools rob the most basic connection between families and children. Love, hugs, and life skills were lost. You don't know what it's like to be a part of the family anymore, and the roles and expectations of relationships with families are missed. The generational trauma shows us the trickle-down effect that ripples in time within us. Phil, I just want to express my deepest gratitude for joining me on my podcast and your openness to sharing this story. It takes incredible strength to revisit such deeply personal and painful experiences, and I truly admire your courage, pardon me. By speaking out about your time in schools, you've not only helped shed light on an important and often painful chapter in Canada's history, but also inspired others to engage in their journey and of truth and healing. So one important thing that I do at the end of my podcast is I provide information for our listeners just in case they're going through a hard time and they need someone to talk to. So if you need immediate assistance, please call 911. And a couple more resources are 988, but one that I found special for this episode is Hope for Wellness Helpline. It's a 24/7 phone number, and I can hook you guys up with that. And there's also an online chat service that's available in many Indigenous languages.
It was a good chat.
Yes.
Good discussion.
It was.
And I appreciate the opportunity you provided me to speak with you too.
Thank you. And I'm glad you were here, and I won't keep you. I hope you have a nice rest of your night.